Hey everyone, Austin here again with another Let's Play video. Today it is going to be Firepower 2000 for the Super Nintendo, also known as Super SWIV in European regions. So Firepower 2000 is actually based on the SWIV series, so I should say it's kind of like part 2 in the SWIV series. There was actually technically 3 SWIV games. The first one on home computers in 1991, like the Amiga, Atari ST, Commodore 64, and so forth. It was its own unique shoot-'em-up that took influences from Silkworm. Then there was the follow-up, which was basically Super SWIV on Super Nintendo, as well as Mega SWIV on the Mega Drive, or Sega Genesis. That one actually never came out in North America on the Sega Genesis, but it was released on the Mega Drive in Europe, whereas we in the United States actually got Super SWIV, which was renamed Firepower 2000 in North America. There was also a third one I found out. I didn't actually know this until doing some research on this game, and it was called SWIV 3D. Apparently it was an MS-DOS game in like 1996 or something like that, and it was a totally different type of game. Still kind of arcadey, but fully 3D, polygonal, kind of interesting. I might have to check that out sometime. So yeah, we're going to be playing through Super SWIV, aka Firepower 2000 for the Super Nintendo. We're going to actually be playing as the Jeep. There's actually 2 different play styles in this game. You can play as the Jeep, which rides along the ground. It can shoot in all 8 directions. And then you've got the heli, or the helicopter, which plays more like a traditional vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up, which is really cool. So yeah, before we jump into the game, guys, I wanted to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters, as always. Thank you all for your continued support, and I really appreciate it. If you guys are interested in checking out my Patreon, link is in the description box below, as always. So I'm going to try to give you guys a couple tips as I play through this game. We're going to, again, be playing as the Jeep, but the first tip is if you want to select your vehicle, make sure you press select on the title screen so you can come here and select your vehicle. Otherwise, it'll pretty much just toss you right into the game. I think probably with the Jeep. So let's go ahead and hit start. The next tip is going to be right at the very beginning of the first level. There's actually a power-up canister you can grab, and that's going to give you a head start on upgrading your firepower. And the firepower actually gets quite massive in this game, hence the name Firepower 2000. Kind of a goofy name, but in a way it almost kind of makes sense, sort of. I don't know about the 2000 part, but firepower that is in this game. There's a lot of firepower in this game. So we're going to come right here and destroy this, and it gives you some upgrades on your main little sort of like missile shot right here. You can actually scroll through your weapons by pressing the L and R triggers. So you've got a flamethrower, you've got this plasma beam, which actually ends up being one of your best weapons in the game, but starting off it's not too good. And then you've got what's called the bullet, and which basically looks like little mini missiles, effectively, but it actually starts to spread out and so forth. But the plasma shot ends up spreading out the most of all the firepower in the game. Later on in the game, you also get a laser. You also get a sort of I don't even know what you would call it. It's like this sort of like arrow-looking shot, but once it hits an object, it splits into 4 different projectiles, which is pretty cool. There's a couple of other different options later on in the game you guys will get to check out. You actually turn into a boat when you play as the Jeep, which actually doesn't happen when you're playing as the heli. And then you'll also turn into a jet at one point in time, and that does actually happen with the heli. So you guys will get to check that out as we get to that point in the game. So, Firepower 2000 is, I think it's a pretty fun shooter, and I think it's a pretty decent looking game on the Super Nintendo. The soundtrack itself is a little hit or miss. It's very kind of like muted compared to a lot of other Super Nintendo soundtracks, but when you can actually hear the music, some of it's actually pretty good, especially like the title screen theme. And some of the other music later on in the game actually isn't too bad when you can actually hear it. The animations in this game are actually really smooth, and it was one of the things that always stood out to me when I played this game. The frame rate is always insanely fast. It's a very brisk game. And playing on a US Super Nintendo system, you know, where the game is running at 60 Hz, it's just really sleek. And I really dig how this game looks on the North American Super Nintendo. I'm assuming in power regions it runs slower. I've checked out a bunch of videos of the computer versions of the game, including, well, not just the computer versions of the game, but I also checked out the Mega Drive version of this this game, and it runs much slower. And after watching that, you know, I definitely prefer how it runs in the NTSC regions. It's again very brisk and very fast. And I'm trying to destroy this thing, and it's taken forever. I don't know why it took so long to do that. Probably because I died. So we're gonna go ahead and switch over to the plasma shot now. Because once you get it powered up a little bit, it's pretty much the best shot in the game. Maybe not the most powerful, but as you can see, it just spreads like crazy, and that is just insanely useful. So something I haven't explained yet is you got these little shields here. These are actually temporary invulnerability spheres, or shields. And again, it's only temporary. But what's actually kind of cool is if you pick up a second one, it actually makes the entire screen explode, like a screen clearing bomb, which is really cool. So you don't really have screen clearing bombs in the traditional sense. You do have other special abilities you can use, which are denoted in the top left-hand portion of the screen. You notice there's a bunch of little red icons in the top left, and those are my special abilities, special weapons, because that's really what they are. So I've got H selected, and you don't really have a choice of what you can use here. It's just whatever is currently highlighted and blinking, that's what you have to use. So right now it's the homing missiles, and I usually don't use these on the first level or so. Maybe I'll use them at the boss, but in general gameplay, I don't really use these sub-weapons on the, you know, the first level or so. I like to save them because they are insanely useful later on in the game. Not even just later on in the game, but even in earlier parts of the game where you have really big enemies, bosses in particular. These special sub-weapons can actually really do some damage, heavy damage. Especially the X shot as well as the S shot, which is like this circular fire wheel that just spreads around you, and you guys will definitely see what I'm talking about, because we will be using our all of our firepower that we have throughout the course of this game, and it makes life a hell of a lot easier. So here's our first boss, and you need to basically target this turret right here, and then once you destroy that turret. And obviously you want to stay away from the front of it because it basically shoots out a bunch of insta-beams. Just some laser shots. We used to just goof around and call them insta-beams in when we used to play shmups back in the early 2000s. A couple of friends of mine would call lasers like that insta-beams. So yeah, and then once these sort of arms come back and reveal enemies, they'll reveal some weak points, and you have to just bounce back and forth between the two different ones. And there we go. First boss down. I'm gonna go ahead and just stick with the plasma shot because it's my most powered up shot. What I noticed is that when you die in this game, whatever firepower you're currently set on will actually get downgraded. So my main shot got downgraded, unfortunately, but my plasma shot is still pretty solid. I don't know if all of your weapons get downgraded when you die. I thought it was just the weapon that you use. So if someone out there that's more of an expert on this game knows for sure, post a comment below and let me know. But again, the plasma shot is just insanely useful because it covers a massive amount of screen space. And what's great is when you play as the Jeep, you can aim in all 8 directions, like I said. So basically how the aiming works in this game is when you turn into a direction and you start firing, as long as you're holding the fire button, you will stay locked in that direction. Now, if you keep mashing the fire button like so, you will you'll just bounce all over the place. So you really want to just hold the fire button in place and then just strafe back and forth as if you were playing like I don't know, like a twin stick shooter or something like that, like Robotron or Smash TV or something along those lines. Or you're playing a first person shooter where, you know, you just strafe left and right. So, and we did get some more firepower upgrades. Let's see what we got. Flame is still weak. The bullet is pretty solid right now. So the bullet is actually a really solid weapon once it's powered up. Let's go ahead and take out this guy. Now what's actually interesting is if you destroy the canister before this guy picks it up, you'll actually, he'll just fly off. You won't have to fight him. But what I found is that if you let him pick up the canister, and you fight him and you destroy him, he'll drop more power-ups. So it's actually worthwhile to let him pick up the canister before you start, before you either destroy the canister or you destroy him. So that's my reasoning behind that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and switch back over to the plasma, actually. I find it just to be the most useful because it covers the most screen space, and it is still of decent strength overall. So one kind of cool thing about Firepower 2000 is it is one of those sort of few Super Nintendo shoot-'em-ups that's actually 2 players at the same time. And so basically what happens is one player plays as the Jeep and the other player plays as the heli, which makes for an interesting, gameplay dynamic. Both players effectively have 2 vastly different play styles, which is quite interesting. It looks like we picked up some lasers, which is good. The laser in the beginning is not going to be all that great because while it's powerful, it fires relatively slow, which will just leave you wide open. But later on, as you get it maxed out in firepower, each weapon can go up 7 levels. Once it's maxed out in firepower, it's really, really, really powerful. And the laser's one of the strongest weapons in the game once it's maxed out. But kind of like the flame, which actually is maxed out right now, it's really not worth using it until it is actually maxed out. And what we're going to do is we're going to use some of our special abilities right here, or our sub-weapons. Because this guy actually takes a lot of hits. There we go. Something else I forgot to mention is that you also get these like little star-looking like bonus icons. They actually get calculated at the end of each level and can give you a lot of bonus points. If you're actually playing for score, you really want to pick all these things up and try to get as many as you can. And there's another shield. Ooh, I blew it up. Now, if you actually just shoot the shields, you will blow them up if you shoot them enough, and they'll basically act as that screen-clearing bomb. So that's actually really good to know, because if you're in a tight position, you feel like you can't get to the shield, but you can still reach it with your guns, then you could shoot it and clear the screen out. So we're gonna actually clear the screen out again by running into this one, because we already had a shield. Now, the reason that you'll see 2 there is because, well, it's intended for 2-player mode. But if you're playing in single player, there is the benefit of not having the extra player. There's the benefit of not having the extra player, so you can go ahead and just clear out the entire screen, which is nice. Alright, so next boss. So basically what happens here is you've got a couple mini turrets you can't really do much about, you just have to dodge the bullets. But then you've got these main turrets that have these sort of like glass coverings or whatever. And so you need to wait until they open and then basically just shoot them. So I've actually got the X weapons selected. I'm going to go ahead and use that. It's insanely powerful. The X one's the best in the game in my opinion. The S fire shield one is actually really, really good, but the downside to it is you have to be up close to the enemies to really make the damage count. Oh, that was my fault. That was actually my fault. I was up way too close to that turret, and you really don't want to be close to these turrets for obvious reasons. Okay, it does actually look like all your firepower gets downgraded now that I realize it. Because my plasma shot was a 5-way before, now it's a 3-way, unfortunately. So... oh, I died again. Well, this is embarrassing. I was actually... you know what's funny? I was actually expecting to, like, 1 or 2 life clear this game. But I've... wow. Okay, well, that's embarrassing. Well, let's see if we can at least recover. And if I can't recover, I'll just redo this Let's Play. Because that's seriously embarrassing. Alright, come on. And this is one reason why sometimes I'll just use my sub-weapons as much as I can on these bosses, because the faster you take out the turrets, the faster the boss is dead, basically. So, I think I lost like 4 lives there. That was actually quite awful, unfortunately. And we still have several levels to go, so we still got a ways to go. And the thing about that dying is that it's going to be a lot harder to deal with these upcoming stages. Okay, it's okay. We actually picked up some firepower, so it's not too bad. So we'll go ahead and try to stick it out with the plasma. The spread shot, the trusty spread shot. So So these like sort of jet things, they actually get torn apart and then they put themselves back together, which is kind of interesting. So you actually have to kill them twice whenever you see them. There's also going to be these planes that come down. They just basically dive right for you. Not really a huge deal when you're playing as the Jeep, because what's really cool with the Jeep, you can actually fly under enemies. When you're playing as the heli, you can't do that. If you touch an enemy as the heli, you die instantly. So what I like to refer to the heli as is basically the hard mode of this game. So what I highly suggest doing is when you first start playing this game, if you're new to this game, play as the Jeep. It is much easier to get through the game. It's also a very unique playstyle. There weren't a whole lot of like forced scrolling shooters like this that allowed you to sort of lock into a position and strafe. There's just not a whole lot of them. So it's a very unique game or playstyle in that regard because of that. But once you get good with the Jeep, go try to get through the game with the heli. It's like I said, it's basically the hard mode of the game. And it's actually really quite tough with the heli. If you don't have the game sort of memorized, you're probably going to die a few times. But since you can't shoot in all 8 directions, it's a lot harder to deal with a lot of the enemies that come down, especially like these patterns right here. This level in particular is one of the toughest with the heli, simply because you don't have the benefit of you know, locking into a direction and you know, strafing in another direction. So if you guys would like to see a playthrough with the heli, let me know in the comments. Perhaps maybe later this year I can do that. I thought about doing that in this video, but I figured I'd avoid, you know, making this an hour-long Let's Play. I don't think anyone wants to sit through an hour-long Let's Play of a shmup. So, but if you guys want to see that, I'll be happy to do that later on down the road. Probably sometime this year while the game's still fresh in my mind. What's actually kind of interesting is I just beat the game with the heli for the very first time this past weekend, which was really awesome. I had never done it before. I've always had major problems with it. It was funny, it was actually a pretty smooth run too. I didn't really die that many times. I think maybe twice. So pretty solid run there with the heli. And so I'll definitely have to do a full playthrough of that down the road. Especially if you guys want it. Especially if you guys want to see that. So this upcoming boss is kind of a pain, but this is actually the part I was talking about earlier where you actually turn into a boat. And what's interesting about the boat is the control changes. So it takes a little while to get used to the new controls in the boat. Fortunately, this is really the only section of the game where you have to deal with the boat. So it's not like you're in boat form for long. At the start of the next level, you'll actually switch right back to the regular Jeep form. But what I want to do is actually use my homing attack right here, because this boss coming up, I really need to use my more powerful sub-weapons. And it's one of my only complaints with the game is you can't really cycle through your sub-weapons. You just have to use them in the order that they appear in. So first come, first served, basically. So you've really got to keep an eye on what special ability you currently have, or sub-weapon you currently have, and which one's coming next, because some sub-weapons are way better for certain bosses than others. You know, let's be honest, the homing sub-weapon actually isn't all that great, now that I think about it, so you might as well just want to use it. So this boss is a major pain. He does this circular shot, and as you can see, if you're not in the right spot, you'll pretty much be guaranteed to die. And there we go, we defeated him. So it was basically 3 of my fire shield shots, or fire wheel shots, I don't know what you want to call it, and that pretty much did him in. You do get some good extra lives in this game though, so on the previous level we only had 3 lives left, now we've got 5 again, so we're back in better shape after the embarrassing boss fight that was on level 2. I still feel really bad about that. I don't think I've ever died that much on that boss before, which is kind of the funny thing about it. This is the thing about talking and playing at the same time. I found that, you know, like, It's almost like the more I do this, the worse I get at it. Maybe it's just that because I don't do these like every other day like I used to. You know, I'm doing them once a week at the most. Sometimes it's once every couple weeks, depending on how far ahead of schedule I get. And so I always feel like I have to warm up. But in cases like this, you know, I think my talking's okay, but it's the actual gameplay skill that seems to be lacking in this instance. So, oh, died again. I actually used my sub-weapon intentionally, thinking that would pretty much do him in, but it wasn't enough, unfortunately. So I just died again, lost my firepower. Fortunately, he blew up and gave me more firepower. We're gonna go ahead and switch over to the laser, actually, and see how well this does here. Oh, jeez, man, that's 2 more deaths. So this is the other section I was talking about, where you basically turn into a jet, and or you switch over to a jet. And this is pretty much what happens if you play as the heli as well. This is the one part in the game that, oh, I knew that was coming too. Why don't I do that? So basically, this guy's exhaust, or his, I don't even know what the hell you call it, will pretty much kill you instantly. So don't touch that. Don't touch his the jet trail. But yeah, this is the only section of the game where playing as the jet, or sorry, the Jeep, we are a jet now, but playing as the Jeep or the heli is identical. In every other part of the game, it's a different experience through and through. We might actually die again. Oh, we got lucky. Got right past that. If you touch those, like, laser-looking things, you will die. And don't touch those blades either. You will die if you touch those as well. Died again. Alright, so this is basically the boss fight. These enemies are going to come down. You have to destroy the helicopter blade. We're going to go ahead and just use our bombs. Well, I should say our sub-weapons. And then after this part, a second form is going to pop out. There we go. Now I'm getting desperate. Yeah, really embarrassing. I think I've died like 7 or 8 times now, which is really, really awful for me. I'm actually usually pretty good at this game. And I mean, I played it on stream just this past weekend, and I just ripped right through the game. So I'm not really sure what's going on today. No excuses. I'm not going to make any excuses, even though I was at work all night. This was one of my 10-hour shift nights. I actually wasn't going to do this Let's Play. One of those Let's Plays I was just going to push off. I actually meant to record it yesterday, but I pushed it off yesterday, and then I came home today and I was like, you know, I'm going to push it off again, but then I actually exercised a little bit, which sometimes puts me in a better mood, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to do it, and then afterwards I'll stream a little bit, try to practice for another Let's Play I'm hoping to have lined up as well. But, yeah, normally my performance in these types of games in particular is a lot better than it is. Granted, it is a genre that's harder to play when you're talking and playing at the same time. There's a lot, you know, that's going on. But Firepower 2000, honestly, really isn't that challenging compared to some of the other shooters on the Super Nintendo. It can be challenging if you don't know what you're doing. But once you know what you're doing, it's actually not that hard of a game. Now, you still have to be on point. You still have to, you know, be aware of what's going on and, you know, kind of have an idea of what's coming up. But we're not talking like it's Gradius 3 or Space Megaforce on the hardest difficulty modes, or it's Super R-Type or something like that, which I ironically do better while I'm talking and playing at the same time. That one makes no sense at all. Speaking of which, I'm gonna have to do an updated Let's Play on Super R-Type sometime, since I did a Let's Play many years ago with my old recording setup, so that is gonna be one of those I'm gonna revisit, and we'll just kind of see what happens with that. I don't expect as good of a run as my old Let's Play from years ago, but just because when I stream it on Twitch, I just seem to not do as well as I did on that Let's Play. So it's one of the beautiful things about Let's Plays is sometimes you nail them, sometimes you don't. But when you nail them, it feels really good, and you know you get to capture that good run on video while you're talking and playing at the same time. So it's one thing to just do it, but then it's another thing to do it while you're talking and playing and explaining things. So, all right. So this is another boss fight, another simplistic boss fight actually, where you just have to destroy a turret. Nothing too crazy here. You just gotta watch out because the turret has like a bit of a wavy fashion to it. And unfortunately, the shield, the fire shield ability is not too good on this part. Doesn't really reach far enough. But this is the other firepower I was talking about, where it connects, it splits into multiple projectiles. When it's maxed out, I think it splits into 4 projectiles. Look at my bullet is just pathetic right now. It's just completely level 1. So we're gonna go ahead and just stick it out with the plasma shot. That was actually really close. I just barely missed that. I'm basically trying to save my my sub-weapons because I've died so many times. I really want to save them for when I really need them. And I don't really need them right now. You know, this boss does take a while if you're not using them. But, I mean, he's not exactly the most challenging pattern in the world. Alright, anytime now. You can die anytime now, dude. Anytime. There you go. That's a good boss. A dead boss is a good boss. Alright, so we're back up to 5 lives again. I was down to 1 life, and then we're back up to 5 already, so... Alright, so this is actually the final level in the game. We actually made it, guys. It looks like we're probably going to go ahead and beat the game. I don't think we're going to have too much trouble in this level. I don't usually have too much trouble in this level. But, I also don't have too much trouble on the earlier levels in the game, but as you saw earlier, I ended up getting wrecked, so I probably shouldn't speak too soon. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I sort of left out in my explanation of this game. In terms of gameplay and whatnot. I think that's pretty much it. So, I mean, again, you've got 8-way shooting with the Jeep, which is really nice. You've got multiple forms of firepower. Really, the plasma shot is pretty much the one to stick with once it's maxed out. Although, this shot... Let's switch over to it. Did I lose it? There it is. That was really weird. That was super weird. It just completely skipped by it. That was odd. So this one right here is actually not too shabby either. From this point and on, you know, when you can actually, you know, connect with enemies, it spreads out and, you know, causes more projectiles to appear, which is actually pretty nice. It's actually kind of a shame that this wasn't available in the rest of the game. It was only available towards the end of the game. And by the end of the game, you're kind of used to the plasma shot, and that's really what I stick with personally. I just will stick with this from start to finish. Alright, we got some more upgrades for my bullet shot, which is kind of a moot point at this point in the game. Now, in this part, you gotta watch out. You have to jump over. And you have to make sure you don't fall down. So it's actually one of the tricky things. Unfortunately, some of the sections on this level actually have these rails that you can't actually go over by just, you know, you can't just walk off the edges on these parts. But on these, like, you know, these graded areas like this, you have to actually make sure you don't fall off. We should actually be close to the final boss. There's actually one trick you have to do on the final boss. Yeah, this is pretty much it. And so what we're going to do is just pound away at this guy with our specials. And so what happens here is you have to destroy this this cover. It's actually a very basic final boss. It's actually not very complex, but you have to destroy this cover, and then a special sub-weapon will appear, and you can only destroy the final boss with that special sub-weapon. So we're going to go ahead and just use up our main sub-weapons here. And that's it. So now we're going to wait for the special sub-weapon. There it is. And then we basically just drop it in the hole, and that is pretty much it. There we go. We have just finished Firepower 2000. It only took us like 10 lives, but we did it without continuing. And actually, technically, there aren't any continues in this game. This is one of those games you gotta do from start to finish in one sitting. But fortunately, again, like I said, it's not that hard. I mean, you do have to practice it. It's probably not a game you're gonna beat on your first try. But with, you know, several playthroughs, or even just a couple, depending on your skill level, you'll probably be able to just rip right through the game. And unfortunately, very, very short ending sequence. Nothing too crazy here. We are forever in your debt. And then basically shows the game credits, and then it takes you to a high score input screen, and that's pretty much it. So that actually took us about a half an hour to get through. And what I actually found kind of interesting is that the production team on the Super Nintendo version is actually different from the production team on the Sega Mega Drive version. And I was looking at footage of the Mega Drive version. I have to say I'm not really impressed with it. It seems kind of subpar by Mega Drive standards. The Super Nintendo version, on the other hand, often gets derided, but I think it's a pretty nice shooter for the system, especially considering it was done by a European development team. You know, a lot of the, no offense to, you know, my fellow Euro viewers out there, but I think a lot of European shmups typically don't hold up as well as a lot of the, say, Japanese developed ones from the same time period. But I think this one really, really holds its own on the Super Nintendo specifically. It's a really nice looking game. It animates very fluidly. And it plays well. If you're playing on NTSC, it's very fast, which I like that. I like speed. I'm not as big of a fan of like the slower play styles of like the original computer versions or the Mega Drive version that I saw online. But yeah, this one often gets derided, and I'm not really quite sure why. I don't know if it's just hardcore shooter fans that just aren't willing to really give it a chance, or if it's just people that haven't really, you know, played enough of it. But I've been playing this one for years. I've always had a blast with it, especially once I got better at the game. And now that I can actually complete it with the heli, it's even more satisfying. So, if you've never seen this game before, I highly recommend checking it out. I actually did a shmups sort of like top list back many years ago now. It was I looked at all the Super Nintendo shmups released in North America, and I actually ended up getting a lot of flack because I actually placed this one relatively high. I placed it, I think, in 6th or 7th place out of all 19 shooters in North America on the system. People are like, I don't really understand this. But hopefully, if you guys, you know, have sat through this whole thing, even if you've never played it before, maybe you'll get it. If not, then hey, to each their own. I do think this is a really fun game, personally speaking. And if you never played it, I highly recommend giving it a shot. If you're an actual collector, I don't believe it's very expensive. It's still one of those cheaper shmups on the system, and especially as such, it's totally worth it. So that is Firepower 2000, guys, for the Super Nintendo. Once again, Super SWIV in European regions. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this Let's Play. As usual, if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, be sure to post a comment down below, and I can try to respond to that. Once again, thanks to my Patreon supporters, and you know, thanks to everyone that watches this video regardless. If you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. I've got a ton of Let's Plays on this channel, and many more to come in the future. But to everyone else that's already subbed, thank you again for your continued support. I'll see you soon, and until the next video, take it easy.